Well, for all of you who are wanting to create a side gig, or maybe you've got a book in the works, we are going to explore today the world of PR with Alessandra Pollina. We're not only going to hear from a woman, though, who's created her own business, but if you're like me, you probably want to know and fully understand what exactly is PR all about and really answer that big question. Do we even need it to grow our businesses, whether we have, a brick and mortar shop, an online business, a service, or even a book we want to sell? Well, Alessandra Pollina is the founder of Quotable Media Company, which is a PR and media agency which works to elevate women-led brands. I love that. She also produces Quotable, which is a female entrepreneur podcast, and Quotable Magazine. Alessandra hosts PR workshops and educational programs for small business owners, which we'll probably talk about today. And she runs the Female Founders of Boston Networking Group. So welcome, Alessandra. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here.
Good, good. Well, as I said in the introduction, I don't know anything about PR. And yet I remember I was at a dinner not that long ago with a woman, Sandra Sigmund, who actually had published a book. She has a business, and so the book was an addition to her business. But she talked about having a PR agency or a PR agent. And I thought that was so intriguing. So talk to us. What is that? What is PR?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, PR is, traditionally and like in the most elemental sense, I think, media relations. So most of the times when someone says they have a PR agency or a publicist or they're working, with someone for their PR, it's helping to place them in the media, wherever, whatever, and however that might be.
Okay.
So I would say in more recent years, it's definitely expanded beyond that. Like a lot of PR agencies do a lot of other things, other pieces of the marketing puzzle when it relates to relating with your publics. So sometimes agencies will do things like, anything relating to your visibility, basically, and relationships. So sometimes that's helping get speaking engagements. Even a lot of PR agencies will help with like your social media or some of that more direct marketing, which isn't like necessarily PR, but a lot of agencies will do that. But mostly when someone says they're working with a PR agency, and what we do as our main specialization is reaching out to media on your behalf to tell them why they should feature you, cover you, have you on, have you, be in an interview, things like that. So it's placing
Okay.
you in the media.
Okay. And are media companies typically looking for stories, looking for people?
Yeah. I mean, most of the time, media companies are everyone's strapped these days in
Yeah.
terms of,
Yeah.
their writers, their producers, their on-air talent. There's never enough. Like they don't have enough staff on deck. So it's more important than ever before now, I think, actually, because there's so much out there and it's really hard for media to know what to actually feature, what to actually like include and talk about.
Okay.
So having these PR people kind of be that in between where it's kind of like, I'm sorry, where we're kind of like, here's the experts who can actually help you with the stories that you want to tell. And it's
Yeah.
helping make the bridge that gap and make their job a lot easier. So, I mean, yeah, if it's like breaking news or something, they're gonna cover it. They're gonna talk,
Mhm.
use, cover that story on the news, but
Right.
you might still need an expert source who can talk about why that's important, or who can talk about like what this means, to the public for the public today, or something like that. So even things like that, they'll often get from like they might go to a PR person that they know works with those kinds of sources and say, hey, we have a story tonight that we need like a quote for. That
Yeah.
usually will be done by a PR person. Or sometimes, good PR people will go to them proactively and say, hey, I know this is in the news right now. I have someone who can be that expert source, that talking head to explain why this is important. Um, but even still, when it's not like, the breaking news kind of thing, that's even the more important, because those stories, it's just, they might not know that the story even exists, so the PR
Yeah.
person is helping get your story out there so that the media people know it's even an option and that it's something they can feature.
So, talk to us a little bit, maybe give us even some examples of customers that you've worked with. I know you focus in on women entrepreneurs, so maybe speak to that, but also kind of show us or tell the story, so to speak, of how somebody came to you and what you actually did for them and how that might have elevated their business.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, we work with all different kinds of businesses, of clients. So there's it really kind of depends. We work with local brick and mortar, so like restaurants. We used to work with a lot of restaurants. We still work with some. Um, so it's something like opening a new location. People don't know it's there. But even if it's like, yeah, they would notice that it was there if they're driving down the street and they see a now open sign. It's about telling the right story and getting the messaging across in the way that you want. So it's not just somebody being like, oh, there's a new restaurant. I can tell what it kind of is by the name, on the sign, and that's it. It's really being able to shape that story and be able to tell people why they should care about your business. So it's more like, hey, here's this great new restaurant, and here's the kinds of things they're going to be offering to the community. And here's, the family story of like why and how they've started this business. And it really helps people, viewers or readers or just the community, like really connect with a brand in a different way than if they just happen to drive down the street and see that the place opened.
Sure,
So we
sure.
do a lot of things like that. It's really about creating that message, building that brand story, and making sure you're getting out to all the right, outlets, not just maybe one or two, but making sure you're getting in front of all the places that your audience might be. And we worked with also solopreneurs and even authors, for example, who have a book that's come out. And it's
Okay.
in that case, it's more like, how do we build up that thought leadership? So for them, we'll do things like pitching them to be guests on podcasts and talk about what their like the main topic that their book is about. Helping them become that quoted expert source in articles around the thing. So say they're a marketing expert, and actually we are working with the owner of a marketing agency right now. Um,
So, do
getting
you help them craft that story though? Because sometimes those of us who have businesses cannot always succinctly explain what is it I do, what is the benefit to my client in a way that can be packaged. So, do you have staff that help in that arena?
Yes, we will start there if that is something that is needed. If people
Okay,
come to us at all different places, we love to work with like a brand new brand or someone who's never done PR before, which can
right.
sort of do the same thing and need to
Yeah.
start. And yeah, we'll help figure that out. What is the messaging that makes sense? What do you want to be known for? And how do we package that up in a way that makes sense? Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, you're young, Alessandra. How'd you get into this business? And yeah, and obviously at some point you started your own business. You got one of the 40 under 40, which those of you who aren't in Boston don't know that is really quite prestigious. It's put out by the Boston Business Journal, 40 under 40. I think almost every city has one though with the business journals.
Yeah.
That was really cool. So how did you get in this business? How did you have the courage to start your own company?
That's a great question. I started young, as you said. I started sort of out of necessity. I was just like, didn't really like working for other people. I,
I
I
can relate
started
to
out, I was working with some other, like a small agency that didn't, well, to give you kind of like the super quick version of the whole story, I got a terrible job right after college that was not good. And I like did not, I knew I didn't want to stay there. I knew I couldn't stay there. So I called up a friend of mine who was actually a mentor who I had interned for. So I had all these volunteer kind of internship positions when I was in college, which
that.
was to get experience.
Right.
So I had worked with him and we had a great relationship. And I called him up and I was like, I'm quitting my job. Do you have any work for me that I can do with you? And he was like, I mean, I sort of like I can have you help me out a little. So I was like, okay. And I did that. And to be honest, like the job was the job I was leaving was so bad that it was just like anything was going to be better. And
Right.
so I didn't even have the time to try to like figure out like, okay, is there maybe somewhere I could make more money or do better work or anything like that? I was just like, let me try it. So I started working with him again, which I had done in the past. And I knew we worked well together and I liked it, but he didn't
Okay.
have a full-time position for me.
Okay.
So when I was like, all right, I need a little more. Um, my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, was like, why don't you just start working on some clients yourself? So I started building up my client base,
Oh, interesting.
even realizing I was starting a business kind of
Yeah.
at first. And so it was like a really kind of slow build. And then, it was like a year or two later that I actually looked back and I was like, I do officially have a business now. Like, let me see when I really
Yeah.
started. And I looked back through my old emails to see like when I had started pitching my first client to the media. And I considered that like when I founded the company essentially. But
Sure.
yeah, no, I just like set up a website and
Went for
started
it.
working with
Yeah.
clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Really, the courage that that took, and maybe, as you're saying, at the time, I didn't even think about it.
I'm
I
too
just,
young to even know.
sometimes bad experiences propel us into something good.
Yeah.
When we say, gosh, I can't do that, I'm going to do this, whether it's personal life or professional life, either or. Well, the Extraordinary Women group, really, audience, so to speak, is women 50 plus, or it can be people who are targeting, women who are 50 plus. Can you talk a little bit about that market? Because the one thing that I have noticed is that it's a huge market, and yet there's not a lot of attention, to some extent, being given to that market. And if you get to the 60 plus range, it's even narrower. From, if you look at, say, influencers on Instagram, or influencers even on YouTube, that's a much smaller market. So talk about what's going on in that market, both from a corporate standpoint as well as a maybe a women entrepreneur standpoint, if you
Oh my
can.
God. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, there's so much there. I think the main thing to keep in mind is, I mean, any age group or any kind of demographic, it's really about understanding like who they are and what they care about right now.
Okay.
Um, women over 50, let's say, like that's a huge group of women. Like if you're talking about targeting them for something like on a PR side or marketing side,
Mm-hmm.
they're huge decision makers. They're running households. They're got more disposable income than a lot of younger women at that point probably.
Agreed.
Um, and it's really about tapping into what they care about and why they would be interested in what you want them to know about. And I hate to say, like, so for me, I'm like, it's much more about what will resonate with them. I don't want to think about it as like convincing them or trying to get someone to kind of like buy into something that you're doing or that you want them to know about. It's really tapping into like thinking about how are we helping them? What do they care about? And how are we helping to serve them or to solve
Sure.
that problem or to make their life easier? Like, and again, it's like the same thing with any other. I'd say the same thing kind of for any audience. It's like tapping into what that is and then thinking about how what you're offering helps. And that's what I like about PR. It's more about connecting the stories
Interesting.
and telling people about what's so great about what you have to offer, then kind of thinking
Mhm.
about that in terms of like, okay, who are these people and how can I sell them something? Or like, how can I
Yeah.
use what
Yeah.
they're going through to want to sell them something? And even though it's kind of similar, I guess, it's more of almost like a mindset shift, but it's really just, I think when it comes to it from the PR mindset, especially, which is where I come from,
Sure.
it's less about trying to convince someone of something and more
Right.
about, hey, I have this thing that I know you're going to love.
Mm-hmm.
And here's how I can make sure that you see that. Here's how I can make sure that you understand that you will love it. Because the
Right.
main issue is if you don't know it exists or you don't know why you should care,
Right.
that's when you're going to ignore it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the stories sell, most definitely. I mean, we all truly, we like stories. Why? And the story is, can I relate to the story? I would imagine. And therefore, do I want to move forward with this person who might be a financial coach, or, I don't know, a life coach of some kind, or whatever. What,
Yeah.
what happens, like when you turn around and try to pitch, let's say you have a client who's got a business, is a coach. She's got a great process that she has set up and has worked with a number of clients. What happens on the pitch side when you turn to the media companies, and what kind of research goes into really finding out, is this a good match? Are the people that would want the product or service that a client is offering, are they part of that particular media group or that media audience? So I'm really trying to dive into what's the reception on the other side when you pitch an article, when you pitch a presentation, a speech, whatever it might be.
Yeah, so much research has to go into it. And that's what's true because you can't always tell, there's not always like some kind of data sheet that you can get that's like, here it is. Sometimes there is. So I will just kind of preface with that. If it's like a print media outlet or, any traditional media outlet, not necessarily like a speaking engagement, but sometimes too, they will have a media kit, which they put together for advertisers. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you actually can take a look at that and you can get some good data there. You
Mm-hmm.
can often find that on their website, or you can reach out to somebody and they'll always gladly send it to you because they think you might be advertising, which is
Sure.
not what we do, but using that data can be helpful. So you can say like, oh, there are, this percentage of this demographic, most of their readers or viewers are women that are 50 plus, live in this area, care about these things. They do break that all down.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't find that, or it's not that kind of outlet, honestly, we do a lot of research into what other articles or stories or pieces or whatever kind of media it is, what else have they been publishing recently? And this comes down to the specific writer or editor that we're pitching. We have to see what exactly that person has been publishing, because that's how you get a sense of because they have so much data on the back end. You might not see it, but
Oh,
they do use that. They see, how many people clicked the link to the article, how many people bought the whatever it is, the newspaper. But mostly it's, once they have all this online data, how many people shared the article on social media, all of this stuff. And they really do tailor their stories to what they think is going to get the most online engagement.
okay.
You can tell what they've been talking about, what they've been writing about or publishing, and get a good sense of if your client or yourself if you're doing it for yourself on your behalf of yourself, is a good fit for that. And I'm not saying not to pitch something if they haven't done something similar. Like, of course, if they've done something too similar, they're probably not going to want to do the exact same thing too soon. So I'm not saying you need to find something that like looks exactly like what you're looking like, but
Okay.
you can get a good sense of the types of stories. Like, are they doing interviews, or are they doing articles where they feature, expert quotes that talk about, educational aspects, like here's the data, or here's information that you should know about this topic. What do those kinds of stories look like? And then you can approach them with a pitch that makes sense based on what you want to, the story you want to tell, but also knowing the kinds of articles that they actually publish, or the kinds of whatever it is, videos, podcasts, that they actually publish. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. If we as the business owner are doing the work, so to speak, the groundwork, what kind of a client, at what point does a client come to you?
I mean, it's really a difference of, it just depends on, I would say, time mostly. It's when
Oh,
their time has gotten, so PR is something like I do always tell people, like, you can do it yourself. You can pitch yourself and nobody knows your story better than you do. So sometimes it
okay.
can be really great coming from you. It can also be very time consuming,
Yeah.
especially if you haven't done it before. You don't have some of those built-in contacts and relationships. So usually, I mean, a lot of the time it can be someone can do it themselves if they have more free time on their hands and maybe less money. But as soon as you're kind of like, I don't really have time for this, and it's a better use of my time to, spend money to have someone else do it, then that's a good time to hire someone to do it on your behalf. And, or, sometimes people just don't like it. Sometimes it can be again, kind of a mindset thing where it can be really hard to pitch yourself for these things because it feels a little bit out of your comfort zone of,
Yeah.
yeah, like, I mean, I think everybody understands what I mean by that. Like, it can be hard to be like, hey, here's why I'm so great and why you should feature me on your platform. Like, that
Right.
can feel really uncomfortable. And that's essentially what you have to be saying. So a
Really
lot of
do.
times it's easier to have someone do that on your behalf.
Right.
Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, if I think of myself, I wouldn't even know who to contact. So let's say I wanted to get into Boston Magazine as an example, I would have no clue. I might look at the list of staff members inside the magazine. Boston Magazine, for those of you that are not in Boston, is a great magazine, and it's a print magazine, also digital, but it was for a long time just print. And so there's a list of, take any magazine anywhere, and there's always a list of who's in charge of what. so to speak. I'd have no idea who to contact. And it feels like you're emailing, your email is going to go in the black hole. So,
Yeah, well, that's when it's good to have an agency too, because we kind of know who, at different outlets. Also, I mean, the other thing, not to make it sound more complicated, but there's so many freelance writers these days, because kind of as I alluded to at the beginning, like a lot of outlets have kind of cut the staff writer roles because it's just they don't have the revenue for it supposedly. So they'll hire freelance writers. So it'll be like someone who basically works for themselves and they write and submit articles to all different publications.
okay.
So you might look through Boston Magazine too and see that almost none of the articles are actually written by one of the people who are listed as the staff writers, because they're hiring freelance writers on a per article basis so that they don't have to commit to, hiring the person. So that adds another level of nuance too. There's, outlets where you need to know the editor or the producer, depending on what it is, where you need to know the specific writers or section editors. And then instances where you might be able to make really good progress with just freelancers. But it's a whole nother thing, because you have to kind of pitch the person and then also tell them what outlet. You have to kind of really keep on top of where they're writing for, where they're contributing to, because they'll usually have certain places that they have relationships with that they write for.
Okay. Now, are there kind of levels? Like, for instance, somebody typically doesn't, let's say, invite you on a television program, as an example, unless you are already published in a number of different magazines or some sort of publications, regardless of what you're all about. Are there levels like that, or not? I don't
You
know.
mean where they would want to see that you'd already been in other things before they'll have
Yeah.
you?
Yes. Like, it's
Yeah.
harder to get in on television, or it's harder to get on a radio show than it is to submit articles to a magazine, or is it really up for grabs across the
I would
board?
say so. One thing that I will mention, just because we haven't really touched on it, and it sometimes is a great kind of gateway option.
Okay.
There's kind of going along too with the whole how there's a lot of more freelance writers right now. There's a lot more opportunity right now than there has been in the past to write your own article. And so we call that a bylined article. It would be an article that says it's by you, and
Okay.
you're actually contributing it to the outlet. Not every outlet does that, but a lot more now do than they used to. And
Okay.
so it doesn't have quite that same level of a clout maybe as it would if it was written by one of the writers or the editors, and they're calling you an expert, but it still does, because it's still saying that the outlet thought you were an expert enough to feature your piece.
Okay.
And then they don't have to have somebody write the piece, so it makes they're more
Right.
likely to do that. They're not going to pay you, and you're not going to pay. I mean, there are some wishy-washy situations here now these days, but normally it would just be you're basically giving them an article and they'll publish it, and then you can say you were seen here, and that your article was featured there. That can be a great place to start.
Okay.
And once you've done some of that, you can show that as examples of here's how I talk about a topic, and this
Mhm.
outlet thought it was important enough and useful enough to publish it. And so you
Mhm.
can bring things like that to other outlets and say, here's where some of my work has been, where some of my, knowledge or methodology or whatever has been showcased. TV also, yes, that you kind of touched on a good point. TV often wants to see that you have been on TV before, or at
Okay.
least see that how you can speak and things like that. So if you've been, I would say, a lot of people say they want to go straight to the big guys, like the
Right.
top national TV morning shows. They will usually want to see that you've been on maybe your local TV station first. And so you might send them examples of you might make a little video, call it sizzle reel kind of, where it shows some clips of you on different TV shows. On your local TV show, I mean, you can definitely pitch that, and they might have you on without having a lot of other experience. It kind of depends, but I mean, we've
Mhm.
definitely had that. That's also, not to toot our own horn, but that is a good reason sometimes to hire an agency or a firm like mine, because we have such good relationships with local TV stations that they know we're not going to pitch them someone who we don't know would be good on TV. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Whereas if they're getting a
Absolutely.
pitch from you yourself, and you're saying I can come on TV and talk about this thing, they don't. And if you don't have
Right.
examples yet, you don't really know. If you might come up
Right.
there and just freeze because you're like more uncomfortable in front of the cameras than you thought.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting kind of what's the word, funnel, if you want to call it that, to promote your business, whatever that business might be. I was going to ask you something though, and now it left me. You uh, we'll go back to PR, but talk to me why you created a magazine. I'm really curious. Extraordinary Women has a magazine that we have published off and on. I know many people in the digital magazine and print magazine field. It is a tough field. One person described it, and it's a very successful magazine that she owns, and she said it's an animal. So I thought that was really apropos, considering all of the pieces that are involved in producing a magazine. Why did Quotable start a magazine, and tell us about it? Who's your target audience? Who subscribes? How do you make any money doing it?
Well, those are all great questions. Yeah, we started the magazine a couple years ago after having the PR agency for several years. I think we'd probably had the PR agency for 7 or 8 years before I even thought of the magazine. And it really came from, well, kind of two places. I would say, first of all, just to be honest, it kind of came from the podcast that we had already started a couple years before that. And I was like, these are great conversations. I love to talk to these women. The podcast is interviews with other business owners about like, how did you do this?
Yeah, it's excellent, by the way, everyone.
Thank you. But as you know, you can only do so many podcast episodes like in a month or a year. And I was like, I wish we could showcase more of these conversations or have more of these conversations, but like I didn't have time to do more podcast episodes. So that was like kind of one like impetus for it. It was like, we could share more stories if they were in print, basically, like if they were written down. Sorry. And then the other thing too is, though, just as PR people, and we were working with really cool women that we loved, what they're doing. We found it really inspirational. We obviously wanted to get it out there as much as possible, and that's what we were doing through the media. But always felt like there just should be more platforms for those kinds of stories. I just felt like there wasn't enough for showcasing women who had started and run successful businesses. And, that doesn't have to have a news angle to it. Maybe nothing like, it's not breaking news, but we can learn so much from hearing about their journey.
Yeah.
And I didn't find there were enough platforms for that. Okay. So that was where I was like, why don't we just make one? I obviously had no idea what I was going to go into it.
Yeah.
I was like, let's try ourselves.
Yeah, I'm there with you. Talk about the magazine though, because you do welcome, potential submissions and whatnot within the magazine. Who reads it, and who do you want to highlight in the magazine and on your podcast for that matter?
Yeah. And it's a very similar audience. I would say when we started the podcast, so when I started, I called it a female millennial entrepreneur podcast because I'm a millennial, and back, 10 years ago, that like meant something. Like there were a lot of like kind of derogatory kind of things that funny. People would say about millennials and their work ethic and things like that. So I was like, we're going to reclaim this term and like make the podcast buy-in for us, because there are a lot of them out there doing great things. We since kind of rebranded a little just to drop millennial from the title, only because so many people would come to me and be like, I love your podcast, but I'm not a millennial, or like, I want to be on a podcast, but I'm not a millennial. And I was just like, started to feel like it was making it too like exclusive. Like it was never intended to be exclusive. It was just like, like there's a whole nother generation coming up now behind us that are doing incredible things too. And like, I don't not want to talk to them. And there are obviously older generations that are also doing amazing things. And I never meant to like exclude them. So that's the only kind of somewhat difference in the audience is hopefully that is shifting and opening up now more that we did make that shift in the name. But yeah, the magazine is really just targeted towards any business owners and business leaders. We say for women leaders. Okay. really is geared towards the business owner, the founder, the CEO. But I think most of the content would be really interesting and relevant for really anyone who's in a top high level leadership role. Definitely focused on entrepreneurs though, any ages, no age range for the magazine. But yeah, everything is supposed to kind of tie back to or relate to life as a business owner. We do accept and welcome and love contributed articles from anyone who wants to be a part of it. Sorry, I'm like apparently having a cough. And so we have different sections, and we do feature interviews with business owners. And we do kind of spotlights on businesses and brands and things like that. But then we also welcome contributed articles from people who want to write about their area of expertise or something like that would be helpful to others.
So the goal of the magazine as well as the podcast is as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong here, is really an inspiration, connection to some extent to other women who are, maybe dealing with some of the same challenges, and finding ways to overcome those challenges. Would that be true?
Yeah, exactly. Motivation and inspiration, I would say, like, are kind of like the two main words I feel like I use a lot. I think there's so much that comes from just seeing that someone else has, and as I said, a part of it is like being a platform for women, because I know how powerful it can be to be able to say, I was in the pages of this magazine, and to be able to have this content that you can share with your audiences or prospective clients or customers, and just in your marketing, and be able to say you were in an outlet, like that is so special. But also, for the readers and the viewers, I just personally have always found so much inspiration from hearing about other people's experiences and journeys. And for me, that's something that wherever I start to feel kind of like, I don't know, down about business or lacking motivation in like a project I'm working on, anything like that, anytime that I hear, like, tune into a podcast about it or read something about somebody else's journey and experience, I get so much more riled up about it again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like, and if she can do it, like I can do it. And that's what I really wanted to be able to bring.
Love it. Love it. Do you think you focus in on women? Do you think the woman buyer is any different than the man? Are we any more keyed into stories than men are? What do you think?
I think so. I think that women do love a story a little bit more than men do sometimes. I think men are a little more focused on like features and services, whereas women really connect with a different way.
It's interesting.
For me, I think there's just less out there. Like, I mean, and I know that's like kind of not true anymore. Like, there are so many things for women these days and spaces for women, but
and businesses.
Yeah, I just still think it's special to create those spaces specifically for women, wherever and whenever we can.
So how do you think PR is changing? What's happening in that world as we are now in, I don't know, deep into what AI and God knows what else? It's something always that's being created. Where's this going in because you got a long career ahead of you, so I want to hear what you think.
There's so much to think about because it's hard to know, and things do, one thing I'll say about PR is it's always changed so fast because it always changes as, media and media technology has always changed very quickly if you really think about it.
Okay.
From the beginning of, radio and TV, and then it was, print publication, it all moved pretty fast.
Yes.
When you really think about it.
Yeah.
The AI stuff, I think, is still it's still so new. It's hard to tell, but it's things are changing so fast now still. And I guess what I was trying to say is just, I feel like we're kind of used to it to a certain extent, just because PR has always been fast moving, but definitely even more so now. And between things like AI, things like the world of social media and influencers, and how so much of the news that people consume is now in those different spaces and not necessarily like in where, even saying like traditional media, like, so I think it's, it's about thinking about where people are consuming their content, where people are getting their news, where people are finding their stories, and having a match up where you're placing yourself or your clients based on that. And
Yeah.
that's changing so fast that it's hard to say. And then, yeah, with the, you mentioned AI, it's articles can be written differently. Like you don't even need necessarily people to write the content, which is so interesting and different. And I think when it comes to PR, what we're going to really have to be focusing in on is, again, those stories and that message. And how do we make sure that we're still really connecting with people at the end of the day, and making sure that, even if someone uses AI to create their messaging or to draft their press release or whatever, it's really still about those personal connections to get it placed somewhere. Well, first of all, to make sure that it actually does still like read and come across in a way that resonates with your actual audience, because those are still human beings,
Yes.
but also how you can get it placed in the places that makes sense. And that's always going to require, I think a human connection of some kind, because those are going to be the gatekeepers. Or if it becomes something like understanding an algorithm enough to make sure that you can get placed in the right places, there's still going to be kind of that nuance there, I think. But yeah, it's just about thinking about how we can get those stories out in a way that will really make the most impact.
Yeah. I really like though the fact that you talk about the fact that we're talking to people. So, even if you craft your PR message, your marketing message, whatever, you making use of AI, make darn sure it's in your voice, because your voice is what is going to actually connect you to that person who's going to use or buy or whatever your service, whatever it is that you're offering somebody, and that's two people. And
Right. That's always your
no matter what.
different. And
Pardon?
that's what
Say that again.
that's your differentiator, is like your personality and who you are. And that's what sometimes people do come to us and they say, well, like I offer this thing and there are 5 other people, in my town who offer the same thing.
Right.
And what we always say is, it doesn't matter. Like, because the way that you offer it to someone is what's going to make the right people be attracted to you and want to work with you instead of that other
The other
person
four. Yeah. Yeah.
offering the same service. It's the way that you offer, it's the way that you connect with them, your energy, your way specific, I say your you-ness, like what makes you you, like that is literally
Right.
what makes people want to work with you over someone else. And that's not something that you are ever going to be able to replicate, or that's I guess my only fear is that people are going to use so much of like the chat GPT and like AI stuff to craft their stuff, that everything's going to start looking the
The same.
same. That
Yeah.
personality doesn't come through. But all that means is that the people who still do take the time and effort and have the ability to actually get their personality out there more,
Right.
it's going to be that much more strong. So it's
That's
just, I think, being really aware of those things and taking the time, when everybody thinks there's all these hacks and tricks to make things so much easier, and just seeing that sometimes that personal touch is actually what's going to make the biggest impact.
Well, that's beautiful. Beautiful way to end our conversation today. But Alessandra, tell people how they can get in touch with you, maybe who might be the right kind of client. When are they ready to get in touch with you? I think just to provide some guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my website is quotablemediaco.com, and you can always email me directly at alessandra@quotablemediaco.com. I'm always happy to connect with people, especially people who have tuned into a podcast. So if you ever like questions or like, I don't know if this is, what I should be doing or not, like
Right.
just reach out. I'm more than happy to. But yeah, if you're ready to get more visibility, you're ready to get more eyes on your service, your business, your brand. It's really just, people who say, I'm offering something great, but I just wish more people could know about it, right?
Yeah.
That's who needs PR, because that's what we're all about, is just getting you in front of much wider audiences than you can through your direct marketing, or, then who are just going to come to
Posting
your.
on Instagram. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You're only getting in front of the same, however many people every time. And it seems to honestly shrink more and more every day, I feel like. Whereas, when you use other media, other methods, you're getting in front of a super huge audience that would never otherwise have heard about you. So if that sounds like something that feels exciting to you, where you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I need, because I know if even a fraction of those people actually decided to take part in what I have to offer, that could be life changing for them. That's what we want to help
Yeah.
create.
I
You
love
can
it.
email me. You can find the magazine at quotablemediaco.com. There's a tab for the magazine on there too. It's
Okay.
Quotable Magazine. And if anybody wants to contribute an article, I would, even if you're like, I've never been featured anywhere before, but like, I want to try, we're a great place to try
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm
Why
telling you,
not?
this is
Yeah, yeah, I love it. And just so everyone knows, all of that information will be down in the show notes. And, I just want to thank you, Alessandra, because you clarified something that feels like you have to be a six-figure business or something before you even consider going in the direction of PR. And you've made it much more understandable as to what the benefits are. So to
Yeah.
making that connection.
I think it's something everybody should know more about. So I'm always happy
Absolutely.
to be that
Yeah,
person.
love it. Thank you. Thank you for your time today, Alessandra.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I just wanted to add a few pieces of information because after I turned the recording off, Alessandra and I continued to talk, and some of the things that we talked about I think could be of value to many of you. First conversation was about being contacted by companies that are trying to get you to pay to be maybe considered to write an article in their magazine. Forbes does that. Or possibly a radio show. There's a number of different radio shows that you pay a certain amount. They interview you. It's sort of like a podcast, and yet they talk about how many people listen and how it's going to end up to, promote your business, et cetera, et cetera. And Alessandra said flat out that she would not recommend that someone pay those kinds of companies because they have a very narrow focus and they don't spend a whole lot of time getting to know you and helping you to craft your story. But she also mentioned that sometimes submitting an article to a well-known magazine, as an example, online magazine or newspaper or whatever, or news outlet, that maybe doesn't have your particular target audience can be beneficial because it adds a layer of credibility to what it is that you do. And when people are sometimes searching on your website, as an example, to find out who you are, they might enjoy reading the article. Now, that's kind of a backdoor way to get somebody to get to know you, but I thought that was of value for many of you because I hear from so many women who are starting businesses who have been contacted by, and myself included, that are being contacted by multiple people who say, for $1,500 you'll get XYZ, or for $900 you'll get, promoted in this way. So be careful in that area. And she called it, as Alessandra said, it's kind of the murky area of public relations, if you want to call it that. But in summary, what is most important is you telling your story and being clear about what your story is around your business, what you're all about, and how, in fact, that helps somebody else. Why would someone want to buy your product? Why would someone want to buy your book? Why would someone want to hire you as a coach? So be concise about all of that. Thank you, everyone. This was a little bit off the wall to come back on and share with you the conversation that I had after I turned off that record button, but I thought it was of value to you today. So thank you very much. We'll see you soon.